Hi, this is Steve Daines, and thank you for calling my Washington, D.C. office. It's my privilege to serve Montana in the U.S. Senate, and I look forward to hearing from you.
Hello, Senator. My name is Morgan, and I'm a constituent from Whitefish, Montana, and my zip code is 59937. I'm calling to urge the senators to vote no on the big beautiful bill, or any bill that includes selling of our public lands. This bill threatens millions of acres of land that belong to all of us. Selling them to the highest bidder is a betrayal of our heritage and our outdoor access, especially for future generations. Our public lands are not for profit. They support local economies, wildlife, and a healthy environment. Selling them would negatively impact our country's future and the future of our planet.
I'm doing my part.
Today's guests are former Montana Senator Jon Tester and veteran Montana journalist Maritsa Georgiou. They've teamed up to launch the new political podcast, Grounded. Each week, they break down the latest in political developments and interview a variety of politicians, journalists, and other guests to bring insight into breaking news. We discussed what's been happening around the state since the last election cycle, some of the never-ending issues affecting our country, and what's new with their podcast. Check out Grounded on your preferred streaming platform. Today's episode is brought to you by Thrivers Coffee. If you would like to help support the fight against human trafficking, visit thriverscoffee.com to order your coffee and make a difference today. Go Pills are a blend of 8 nootropic neurochargers that support focus, clarity, attention, fast recall, and decision-making. These have actually been tested by some of the U.S. military's top special operators who have given rave reviews to Go Pills. You can get 15% off your order when you use the code HELLO15 at checkout when you visit gopills.com. Well, on today's show of Hello Whitefish, I am very pleased to welcome award-winning journalist Maritsa Georgiou and former Montana Senator Jon Tester, second-time Hello Whitefish guest. You guys have launched a new podcast called Grounded, which is quickly becoming a very popular new political podcast. How did this all come about? How did you guys get connected and start this awesome new podcast together?
You first. I don't want to confess to anything here. So you go first.
You know, I was working at Scripps News, and we had a show, the only national TV news program to originate out of Missoula, Montana, and it was amazing. And then we got word last fall that they were laying off about, I don't know, over 280 of us. And so we were kind of gearing up toward the end of that. It was November 15th, our last day. And, you know, the day after the election, I saw the news about Senator Tester's race, and a few weeks went by, and I did email him and I said, hey, we're both out of jobs. You need help on the farm, or do you want to start a podcast? And I didn't expect him to say yeah, but he's like, sure, I think. Isn't that what you said? Both?
I did. Yeah. I make mistakes all the time, but yeah, I did say sure. I did. Yeah, my story is very similar. I was the only actively engaged farmer in the United States Senate, and then on the first Tuesday in November, I got word that I was going to be unemployed, and so I had that in common with Maritsa. We were both getting ready. Oh, I couldn't file for unemployment insurance, but I was gonna. But and then she sent me this. She sent me an email, and I knew her. I didn't know her very well, which is probably why I said yes. And she said, "You want to do a podcast?" And I said, "Yes, if we can make millions." And she said, "Okay, we'll do it then." And assuming I was going to make millions, and I'm still waiting for the first
dollar.
Still waiting for the first dollar, actually.
Yeah, I think we're, subtracting how much we've paid on, programs. I don't know. We might have made $5.
It's been a lot of fun, and it's been a lot of fun. First of all kidding aside, Maritsa's a pro, and she does a really, really, really good job, and it's good to be able to connect up with somebody who's as good as she is. But what's been really fun about this is all our guests. I mean, our guests have been incredible, and some of them surprisingly articulate about how they see the world, and it's been a lot of fun, because without the podcast, certainly wouldn't have had a chance to do 20, 30-minute interviews with some of these people.
It's been really fun. And I mean, I know we weren't close. Certainly I never thought I would get so many funny texts from Jon Tester in a day. But I did cover him for 18 years. Like, you knew me.
Yeah, but I didn't know you. I mean, I thought you were normal, and boy, was
Now
I
you
wrong.
know better.
Exactly. But it's good. No, she was a very good reporter. She held public officials accountable, which is what reporters should do, and I appreciate that because the truth is been said many times. If you vote for a bill and you don't have a damn good reason why, you probably shouldn't have voted for it. And it was up to the press, by the way, and that's why, as we see the administration diminish the press, it's very, very dangerous because it takes away from accountability from the people who we elect to go back to Washington, D.C. or Helena or, Flathead County or wherever you're at to do their job. And trust me, reporting at every one of those levels, local, state, and federal, is really, really, really important.
Yeah, it's interesting, especially when we live in a day and age where people's attention spans seem to be getting shorter and shorter. Yet we have these long form podcasts that go 2, 3, sometimes 4 hours when you look at some of Joe Rogan's conversations. And plus the impact that podcast had on the presidential campaign, where you had Donald Trump going on Joe Rogan's podcast, Theo Vaughn, even Lex Friedman's podcast. And I'm not sure how much of an impact it had, but it definitely gave him exposure to a pretty important demographic. So I'm curious what your guys' experience has been with the impact of podcasts.
I think that, it's funny. I don't think either of us actually were really big podcast listeners before this. But I'm amazed at how many of my friends are. And they just plug in and they listen to podcasts while they drive. They listen to podcasts while they go for walks. While they do chores around the house. And I think that it's just a totally different way of receiving and consuming information. And it's more conversational, and it feels like you're actually just in a room with this person. The other thing is that it's on demand, right? So I say this, my industry, TV journalism is on a steep decline. And a lot of that is because of the way the technology has advanced. You used to basically schedule a date with Cronkite or Brokaw or whoever you were getting your news from. You sat down at 5:00 and you'd watch the news and you'd devote that time. And as people's lives got busier, and then we had smartphones and you had social media and video content, people don't sit down and do that anymore really the way they used to. And if they do, almost always they're scrolling on their phone the entire time they're watching. So the media landscape has changed dramatically, and I think this is just a more intimate way to consume news, but also it's more personal. Like, we joke around, we have fun, and it feels like you're in on a conversation at a coffee shop, if you're doing it right.
The other thing I would say is that it gives people a chance to learn more about who we're talking to. I'm not just talking about Maritsa and me or Morgan Delaney. I'm talking about the people we have on. And oftentimes, if Maritsa Georgiou is interviewing you, it's a 3-minute gig, and ask a few questions and you're done. We get to not only ask questions, but then we get to have a little fun and talk about drinking beer and all that stuff. And I think that's. I think it's more enjoyable. You don't have to listen to a podcast. You don't have to listen intensely. And by the way, as Maritsa just said, if you think you missed something, you just shoot it back and listen to it again. And so it's pretty cool. And she's right. I listened to a few podcasts, not because I wanted to listen to them. It was because my 40-year-old daughter listened to them. And so that's kind of how I got going on it.
Yeah, it's really been interesting. I mean, especially going back to when you were first on my show, Senator, during the last election cycle, and the response I seem to get from Democratic candidates that were running and the eagerness they had to come on podcasts such as my show. I also had Ryan Bussey on, great interview with him. I was very welcoming to both sides. Like, I really wanted to try to be completely politically independent and just invite people on to have, like you said, like coffee shop conversations. But when it came to the Republican candidates, it was just crickets. I could not get any response for the bigger candidates or smaller candidates. So, and it just seemed to be that, I mean, Maritsa, I don't know if you can speak to this, but I heard rumors that they were intentionally trying to stay away from the media and from interviews unless they were with people that they knew were lockstep in with their policy agendas, and kind of like more would going to give them like a softball interview. It seemed like, I don't know if that's the right phrasing, but it just seemed like they were very picky, if not completely not interested in doing these interviews. I don't know if that was something that you had experience with.
So I would just tell you that I think that all you have to do is look. I mean, they're told not to do town hall meetings. Have you seen any town hall meetings by any of the Montana delegation? No. And then you see, Joni Ernst does one and talks about, people get used to it. If you lose health care, it's okay. You're going to die anyway, for God's sake. So I can see why they want to stay away from town halls. But the truth is that, no, that's absolutely correct. And that's why when we talk about the media and their role in our democracy of holding public officials accountable, and the public officials don't go on your podcast, they don't get interviewed by any of the local news stations. Why? Because they don't have to. Because they can still get elected without doing that stuff. And I think it's going to catch up to them after a while. Because I just don't think Montana's wired that way. I could be wrong, but I don't think Montana's wired that way. I think they expect their elected officials to at least listen to them and answer tough questions. But we'll see. They got away with it last election. We'll see. They might get away with it this election. But I think long term, I think it's a losing proposition.
Here's what I'll say about that. I think, I think we saw some candidates do more press than others, for sure. I mean, there was this wild video. I remember the CNN crew was out here. They were texting me, how do we get in touch with the Sheehy campaign? How do we get in touch? And then there was this video where they were just trying to get B-roll of him walking out, and a SUV pulled in front and blocked their cameras. I mean, and that takes a lot of effort. What it also does, though, is that it fuels this narrative that the media is one-sided. How can the media, I even hate to say the media, how do journalists cover multiple sides of an issue if one side is completely silent? And then you do what you can and you talk to people around them and you try to get statements or information off of social media, but then they can still say like, well, that's not a complete story. But if they won't talk to you, how will it ever be a complete story?
Yeah. So I'm curious to get your guys' thoughts on the big, beautiful bill and how this will impact Montanans if this does pass the Senate. We are now, I think, the most expensive state in the country to live in, yet we have really bad poverty. We also have, I think, the highest amount of children in foster care per capita. So when you look at the potential cuts to Medicaid and Medicare, and then you have the potential sale of public lands, which I know has caused quite an uproar on both sides of the aisle. And I know both Daines and Sheehy have said that they do not support that, but we know how this has been remolded and rebranded and re-amended. So I'm curious what your guys' thoughts are on how the big, beautiful bill could impact Montanans.
I think the impacts of this bill on rural America is going to be devastating. Let's take Medicaid cuts for an example, and you don't have to be on Medicaid to feel these cuts. We've got rural hospitals. The big ones are not exactly in cherry shape, and the little ones are hanging on by their fingernails. You take away the Medicaid, so they have more charity care. They're going to go under. And then you think rural America has been evacuated the last 50 years. Just watch. People aren't going to be able to live here because if you don't have access to health care, it's pretty tough to live here. That's just one thing, okay? The SNAP benefits being reduced. And as was already been pointed out, I mean, this isn't about taking SNAP benefits away from people who don't work. This is about a test to see if you can fill out some forms to get the benefits that you need to survive. And so you're going to see that happen. But here's the biggest one. I think is absolutely amazing. Public lands. This has a part in it that sells off our public lands. And look, Ryan Zinke, I served together. I don't have any problem with him, but when it comes to policy, I got some big problems with him. And he stood up and he said, public lands need to stay in public hands, and this is really important for a state like Montana. That bill passed by one vote in the House. And he could have said, jerk that out of this bill or you don't get my vote and this bill ain't going any further. But he didn't. But he put out press releases saying, we need to have public lands in public hands. Let's see what happens in the House. I'd say the same thing about Downing, by the way. in the Eastern District. I'm talking to you guys in the West. But the Eastern District, same thing. Could have stood up and did it and didn't. Let's see what happens in the Senate, because it's only going to pass by a vote in the Senate. I'll make that prediction right now. I think they can let 3 people walk, and there's been 3 and plus that have said they're going to go. And if public land's this important, which I don't believe they think they are this important, and I said that during the campaign and before, but we'll see. You know, it's kind of like the Job Corps. Those were important when there was somebody fighting for it. They jumped on board. Now that they're going to pull them, quite frankly, and I'm not there fighting for Job Corps, you don't hear anything but crickets out of them. And so there's 3 things I mentioned: Medicaid, SNAP programs, public lands. There's stuff for the Farm Bill that doesn't make any sense. But here's the worst part: as that bill gives tax breaks to the uber rich, and it cuts programs that are important like Medicaid and SNAP and a whole bunch of other ones, you know what else it does? It adds, I believe, $4 trillion to the national debt. I mean, if these guys want to deal with the national debt, and you want to give tax breaks to the biggest donors, who, by the way, they're the ones that funded these campaigns. That's why we need campaign finance reform, which we can talk about later. You need to talk to Maritsa here for a second, because I'm hogging the microphone. But the truth is, that bill stinks. And it doesn't pass a smell test. It doesn't work for rural America. I don't think it works for urban America. I don't think it works for this country. And if they were smart, the people in the Senate, they'd say, time out, go back to the drawing board. Let's develop a bipartisan bill that takes the best ideas from Republicans and Democrats and pass something that works for working people in this country, and passes something that works for urban America and rural America, and move it forward. Because right now this bill doesn't work for anybody unless you're uber rich.
And I think a lot of what the senator's talking about, these are issues that are coming up in these debates. And we are hearing from Republicans in the Senate, certain Republicans, Josh Hawley's one of them, who says, we cannot cut Medicaid like this. This will be a disaster. It'll be shooting ourselves in the foot. And then you have others who are fiscal hawks saying, why are we going to vote on this? Rand Paul saying this. Why are we going to vote on this? It raises the debt ceiling and adds to the deficit, and this is not what we're about. However, we saw several Republican House members say they wouldn't vote for it in its current form, and then the president went up to Capitol Hill, and suddenly we saw a lot of them flip. The difference, I think, here that might benefit the members of the Senate is that House members are always up for re-election every 2 years. So some senators might not be as vulnerable to a primary. And as far as I know, the final resolution that passed the House did strip the sale of public lands, but there's still some concern because it's still very much a plan that many members are okay with.
Yeah, I mean, it seems to be straight out of the Project 2025 playbook. This was on there. And this is actually, the selling of public land is something that I remember hearing about like 10 years ago. There was politicians in Utah that were trying to pass legislation making it easier for public land to be sold off and privatized. So, I mean, I think the uproar is good because people are realizing that land is a very finite resource. And once it's gone, it's gone. I mean, they are claiming it'll take a good chunk out of the deficit, I think $150 billion, but that's actually not that much money. So,
well, when we talk about affordable housing, a lot of people talk about the land for affordable housing, and there's no way they're going to sell off some of the most beautiful land in our country and put affordable housing on it. I just can't imagine.
Also, it'd probably help to have affordable housing near some actual civilization. I know a lot of these spots are looking to sell are extremely remote, so that argument doesn't seem to hold a lot of water.
Well, yeah, I mean, if Whitefish is a great example. Big Sky. I haven't had enough coffee. What am I trying to say? Jackson Hole, Wyoming. I remember when the flooding happened in Yellowstone and washed out some of those commuter roads, and all of a sudden people couldn't get to work. And the reason they couldn't get to work is because they couldn't live where they worked because it was too expensive. So it's a problem, especially in these resort towns, and it's a problem I've been talking about my entire journalism career, almost 20 years now in Montana.
What are you guys' thoughts on what's been happening here in Helena at the state capitol? One interesting thing that stuck out to me is the fact that Republicans and Democrats seem to be working together quite a bit this legislative session, which seems a little surprising, but not in a bad way.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think that the expansion of Medicaid was a big deal. Keeps a lot of folks on health care. Unfortunately, they're going the opposite direction at the federal level, which I think is devastatingly bad. We've already talked about that. I think the property tax relief stuff, even though not perfect by any stretch of the imagination, was a step in the right direction for sure, especially for medium valued homes. I think the trust that they set up that will help with infrastructure, bridges and dams in particular, will help with some child care issues. If the governor hasn't signed it yet, I don't think. I think that there's some other things in there about public employees' retirement system. If it starts going upside down, they can utilize that for a backstop. I think there's a revolving fund for affordable housing. So that trust bill, I think, is a really good bill, and could do some good stuff. And then I think they also, and I think it's because there was a group that worked together in a bipartisan way that they were able to stop a lot of bad stuff.
How do you guys think things are going in Helena at the moment? How do you think things are going in Helena?
I appreciate the folks who are willing to work across the aisle to do what's right for Montana. I think that's what's missing in Washington, D.C. And I would just close by saying this. Helena looked pretty sane compared to what was going on in Washington, D.C. I mean, so they and I don't think it's because they did exceptionally better work this cycle than the legislature. I just think that Washington is absolutely, totally dysfunctional. We've got the executive branch that's running the legislative branch, and we've got a judicial branch that's putting out rulings that the president has pretty much given the middle finger to a number of those rulings, and I just think that's not how accountability is supposed to work. So we didn't see that kind of garbage in the state legislature, and I think they need to be commended for that.
I think it depends on who you ask too. I mean, if you talk to Democrats coming out of it, a lot of them I've heard say, hey, it actually went a lot better than we thought it might go. And then if you talk to really staunch Republicans, they're really mad about that group of Republicans who worked with Democrats on some of these issues. So it just depends how you're looking at it. But, you know, I can't remember which legislative session, but I remember certainly reporting on a bill that would have banned nude colored yoga pants. So we're far from that, which is a good thing.
I think I remember that one. I mean, that seems like a pretty clear violation of the First Amendment.
Yeah, I agree with that. It's a freedom, it's expression. Yeah.
I think you got to look at it. I think you got to look at it this way: if yoga pants are your biggest concerns, things are going pretty damn well. You know.
Right.
That's a great point. I hope we get to that point in society. That's hilarious. Yeah, and one piece of legislation I was very happy to see the governor sign was to better fund the Lake County Sheriff's Department and tribal police. I don't know if people understand the severity of the human trafficking and narcotic trafficking that happens in that corridor. So that was great to see. The governor signed funding that I think is $125 million a year, with some starting next year, with some funding being allocated for this year. Interesting. I just had an interview with John Norris, who is a former game warden from California, who lives up here now. And when he was in California, he was tasked with eradicating these illegal cannabis grows that were being run by cartels on national forests. And these grows were just decimating the wildlife out there because they were using all sorts of banned poisonous chemicals. But they have now migrated over to Montana, where these cartels are basically bunkering down on remote areas of reservations where they can distribute meth and fentanyl and make a ton of money doing it, and doing it pretty scot-free because there's not that much law enforcement in these remote areas of Montana. So seeing that the governor signed funding that can hopefully help combat the cartel activity that's happening between counties is so important.
Yeah, that I agree with you on that, Morgan. I think that the legislators from that region did a nice job in educating the rest of the legislature. I think it was an important piece that oftentimes folks that say live over where I am, it's not really on the radar screen. So there had to be a lot of good education done to get that bill passed, and so they need to be commended for that.
The other one is the Montana Media Bill, really put forth and so much work done by Whitefish native Linwood Fields.
Oh, that's a huge win. And what's really great about the Media Act getting their cap raise is that really makes Montana much more competitive against other states that also have pretty lucrative film incentives. And it'll just really help provide so much more money for not just jobs in the film industry that are like producers or actors or directors, but for electricians and carpenters and plumbers and caterers. I mean, there's so many jobs that can benefit from the film industry. So that was a huge win. And I just commend Linwood for all of the incredible hard work she did to get that passed.
And we'll need it if we really see a 100% tariff on any productions made outside the United States. So they'll need more places to film.
So what do you think Democrats should be working on, especially at the national level, as they try to secure a candidate who is hopefully controversy-free? I know it looks like Pete Buttigieg might be gearing up for a run at it, but what do you think they should be focused on?
Wait, do controversies are a thing that we care about? I don't know.
You know what? Touche.
Go ahead, Senator.
No, I was hoping you'd go. No, I'm going to tell you there's going to be a lot of people that are going to be jumping into presidential thing, and I think that's a good thing. By the way, I think the debate, the issues, and hopefully they'll talk about issues. I think that's what was missing in the 24 cycle, quite frankly, and I think it cost dearly. That aside, I think what Democrats ought to be doing is figuring out a message, and there's plenty of ways to go. You can go on the corruption line. We could talk about selling crypto coins and influence that goes with that, or taking a $400 million jet from Qatar. But the truth is then the people who are running better walk a pretty damn fine line. They better not be trading stocks. In fact, I don't think they should own stock. They better, they better publish their damn schedule so people can know what they're about. They better have town hall meetings. The list goes on and on. So there's one thing, there's a corruption thing. And then the other thing I would just say, the corruption thing is out there for the taking. But you can't do it unless you walk the walk. The other thing I would say is you deal with issues that people talk about. I mean, if there's a mistake that was been made in 24, and there were plenty, southern border, well, people were talking about the southern border. It's true there was a bill that came up about 8 or 9 months before the election, but it was too late. Should have done something long before that for it. And the Republicans stopped it, and they didn't pay a price for stopping it. But nonetheless, it should have been dealt with before then. I think the inflation thing's another one. I think cost of housing is another one. I think cost of higher education is another one. Come up with some good, solid, built platforms that can help address those kind of issues. But ultimately, in the end, I just think you've got to have somebody that understands that it's more important to listen than it is to talk. And get out there and value people's opinions, and work towards making this country. I think, by the way, the thing "Make America Great Again" will be pretty applicable after this president gets done. We're gonna have to need somebody to make America great again. He's pushed away all our allies. He's spent money on silly stuff that has no return whatsoever, and made the wealth gap wider than it's ever been before. If this bill passes, this big, beautiful hunk of shit that they're going to take up in the Senate here pretty quick. Sorry.
Well, this is a conversation we have constantly. Like, pretty much every episode of our podcast, I think we talk about, what are the Democrats doing? What's happening? And there are certainly efforts out there. Senator Cory Booker, who's a friend of Senator Tester's, with the 25-hour filibuster, those kinds of things, but does it actually move the needle? And when we had Minnesota Governor Tim Walz on our podcast this week, we talked a lot about this and where he thinks they missed the mark. And really, when you think about this last election and how many people just stayed home, because They don't feel like it matters. They don't feel like their voice makes a difference. And it's really about connecting to those people and getting people engaged. We talked about a few ideas out there with Governor Walz this week. One of them is, really engaging youth, and not just youth, but like young men. And we saw a huge push of young men rally around Donald Trump. And some of that had to do with influencers like Andrew Tate and some of the others. But yeah, I mean, I didn't say good influencer. I didn't say good, but yeah, I mean, and for whatever reason, those messages are resonating with young men. But I know for sure, there's a group called Turning Point USA. It's Charlie Kirk's group. And he has chapters in the Flathead Valley at the high schools. And I don't know about Democratic groups that have chapters like that, and they're getting young kids engaged. Senator Tester's saying you're going to need to make America great again, and I don't know if that means he wants a hat or not. We'll have to ask him. But this is like Governor Walz was saying, that you give these kids a uniform, they feel included, they're part of something, they're enthused, and they're excited. And I don't see a lot of that on the Democratic side. As much as the GOP is really utilizing that tactic. And the other idea that's out there that we're going to talk about next week with the person who has recently brought this back up in the headlines is the idea of a shadow cabinet, which I think is fascinating. And, Politico basically unpacked this idea of a shadow cabinet that Senator Alyssa Slotkin put forth. They said, who would our shadow cabinet be? And guess who was the shadow Interior Secretary?
Maritsa Georgiou.
No, Jon Tester.
Told me to guess.
Oh my goodness, that would be amazing.
That's who Politico, nominated, the writer nominated. I don't know. I think I kind of think Ag, but
I'd never get confirmed.
Not in a shadow. You don't have to get confirmed.
Oh, I thought I'm golden. Cool. All right.
Yeah.
It's good. We had John Bolton on here a couple weeks ago, and John Bolton said something that I think was absolutely spot on. He said a lot of things that were pretty interesting. But one of the things he said was he thought that 2024 could have been a change election. He said, I talked to a lot of people, and by the way, I did too, that weren't happy with either one of the candidates. And if there would have been a different situation than what transpired after that debate, it probably would have had a different outcome, maybe. But the truth is that I don't think, I talked to a guy who I buy equipment from Minnesota, by the way, I might add, for my tractor, and he said, I just got to tell you, this was like in August. I'm not crazy about either one of these dudes, or people, I should say, because I guess one of them wasn't a dude. But yeah, wasn't crazy about either one. So, that's what's good about if you have a full-blown primary and people vote in the primary, not just 12 or 13%, but actually people vote in those primaries, because then you get good qualified people that have vision for the country.
That is something, though, that we really haven't talked a lot about on our podcast yet, but it's probably worth some conversation, and that's our primary system in this country. And so many people attribute our division and the widening gap between the two parties to the primary system, because only the most, passionate supporters generally go out and vote in the primaries, and that's how we get a lot of extreme candidates. And when you look at the actual percentage of the population that votes for somebody like Marjorie Taylor Greene, for instance, it's in the single digits, but because, it was such a small primary turnout, she won handily.
Oh, it was fascinating to see. I mean, we had a good amount of candidates, I feel like, that were running on the Republican ticket that were like straight out of high school that got elected and are now in the legislature, that are like 17, 18. So it's pretty interesting to see. And you're totally right. Like with the whole Andrew Tate influence, I have many great friends who are conservative and Christian, and they are very upset with the fact that someone like Andrew Tate, who is a human trafficker, is peddling so much influence with these young men who need, they want a support system, they want structure, they want to be strong and confident. They see someone like him and think he is saying things that validate their beliefs. But I have a lot of friends who are conservative who are very much against that and are very excited to see better candidates with better values and morals who are strong men but can also be compassionate and empathetic that can come and support our community at the political level. So it's very interesting to see. And I think there's a lot of people on both sides that are just, as you said earlier, very much ready for new candidates.
Look, I think both parties can do better. I don't think there's any doubt about that. Putting people up who really are working folks, who have a connection with their state, who understands what's important for families
Yeah.
that they talk about, every morning when they get up and every night before they go to bed. And until we get folks that understand those challenges, I mean, then you got problems. I mean, I don't want to pick on the lady from Iowa, but it's pretty obvious that when you're at a town hall, and like I said, I commend her for having a town hall, but people challenge her on Medicaid, and her response is, well, live with it because you're going to die. I mean, that's
I'm gonna die anyway.
yeah, you're going to die anyway. That's a person who needs to get the hell out of Washington D.C. and go out
right.
and talk to people that she grew up with, because that's a pretty heartless perspective. And if you extrapolate that out, as Maritsa Georgiou said before, then why are you there doing anything? Because you're going to die anyway. So, why build roads, or why do medical research, or I mean, the list goes on and on. Why do all this stuff? Because, well, hell, you're going to die anyway. It's crazy. And then the apology saying, well, geez, I didn't bring up the tooth. I'm glad I didn't have to bring up the tooth fairy. I mean, talk about a slap right across the face of people who really are faced with having no access to health care. It's just unbelievable. It's hard for me to believe.
Oh, it's so funny. There's this punk rock band from the 80s called Bad Religion, and they had a song called We're Only Gonna Die from Our Own Arrogance. And I think that is more relevant than ever.
Can I get the lyrics for that? Maybe I'll try to sing.
Yeah, I think Jeff Ament probably knows that band.
We could ask him. He's on our show tomorrow.
What he's done for the community is just so amazing, building skate parks across Montana. And obviously, Pearl Jam is just so prolific. So that's awesome. You guys are tight, John, and have that big skate jam up in Big Sandy.
Yeah, I missed you this year. Were you at it this year?
No, I wasn't there this year, but I'll definitely be out next year. So I got a 5-year-old daughter, so it's start to get out to that kind of stuff. But she's getting into skateboarding.
No, that's cool. No, Jeff is. You don't find anybody that's got a better set of priorities than Jeff Ament. He's absolutely concerned about his community as much as he is himself, which is pretty damn amazing.
So the last question I have for you is, I recently watched the movie by A24 called Civil War, and the fascinating movie. And the premise of it is that the president gets elected a third term. And so it's crazy to see that this is actually kind of, it looks like might be playing out. You see Trump and people like Steve Bannon saying that he will definitely be getting a third term. Not so much that he's going to run, but they seem to be declaring that he will be president for a third term. And so some of my friends and I have been doing thought experiments as to what that means. Like, what could he do that would automatically make him a third term president? And I'm curious what your guys' thoughts on that whole situation is.
Well, I don't know how their mind works, but we have seen him declare emergencies when no emergencies exist with regularity to try to put his agenda through, so he doesn't have to deal with Congress and he doesn't have to deal with the courts. I mean, the tariffs are one of them. I mean, he has no business putting tariffs on. That's Congress's job, but he declared emergency so he could do that. And then, by the way, this is a long list of emergencies that he's declared so that he could implement an agenda without any input from anybody but himself. And if you look, I don't know, but there may be something he can do along those lines, and then just say, well, it's so important that I can't leave office. I've got to stay in. I think we're in a constitutional crisis now, but that would be a no doubter. And then And then if you consider the fact that there's no regard for due process, there's no regard for different opinions. There's no regard for a lot of things that this country's held dear for the last 250 years. It makes you wonder. I do not put anything beyond the imagination that these folks have.
Oh, there's a lot to talk about there. First of all, Civil War was terrifying. It was a terrifying movie and horrific to think about. Second of all, I mean, when asked like exactly how they would accomplish that, I think it was Steve Bannon who said, "Oh, we're looking into it. We're researching it." So they definitely have things they're looking at. And Senator Tester talks about this all the time on our podcast. Quit looking for loopholes and just follow the Constitution. And it seems like they are looking for loopholes. One of the avenues that I read about had something to do with electing, like putting him on as a vice presidential candidate and then having like J.D. Vance run as president or Marco Rubio or whoever, and then they would step down and then he would move in because he wasn't then elected president for, it's about semantics there. But yeah, I think there's a lot going on. There's this other thing that happened with the emergency powers, like Senator Tester was talking about, and he could probably explain the rules better than I can, but there was something to do with, Congress being able to stop it. And they had, if somebody objected to this use of emergency powers for tariffs, then they had to respond within 10 business days. But then they rewrote the rules so that a day isn't a day. Is that right, Senator?
Yes,
Okay.
absolutely. Absolutely
they
right.
rewrote the rules
You
so that
said it is right.
a day isn't a day, and so for the rest of this Congress. And so if anybody, like a 24-hour day isn't they're not recognizing calendar days. And so if somebody says, hey, we object to this, whether it's even a Republican, they say, oh, well, a day is not a day, and so we don't have to respond within 10 calendar days because those aren't the rules of session.
So to extrapolate this out, this actually proves my point that if a day isn't a day, why are we paying them if they're not doing their job?
We're all going to die anyway.
Of our own arrogance. Oh, and then there's the tariff squeeze, which we are definitely starting to feel around here. I have a friend who's in manufacturing. He manufactures composting toilets and installs them in national parks and really remote areas. It's amazing technology, but he is definitely starting to feel the pressure from tariffs as well as from as well as from shipping costs and whatnot. And being here in Montana, there's a lot of industries that are at risk of being directly impacted from tariffs, whether it's from Canada or overseas. So I'm curious if you guys are hearing any stories of people or industries getting pressured from the tariffs right now.
Huge.
Well, I mean, go ahead. You first. I went first last time. Your turn. Go ahead.
No, you go first.
The stories I've heard about Canadians who are pissed off, and rightfully so, that aren't coming down and spending money. That's having some major impacts economically on a lot of Main Street businesses in Montana. I don't know if it's true with states that aren't border states, but I'm sure all border states are being impacted, especially if you're as close to the borders, a place like Whitefish or Kalispell or Great Falls or Havre or Glasgow or whatever it might be. But the bottom line is, as long as there's the uncertainty that revolves around this tariffs, on again, off again, Taco Dawn, and everything that he's doing, then you're going to have businesses that are going to lose money because you've got to have certainty if you're going to have the ability to be able to plan for the future and be able to make a profit. And it just drives me crazy because most people, I think, yeah, tariffs can be used in a way that makes sense and we can be a net beneficiary if they're applied the right way. But that's not how he's doing it. And then you're Hegseth over in the Pacific Rim talking about what a threat China is. Like all these people are going to come to our rescue and we screw them with tariffs and we push them away and tell them that they're the problem. It's Russia and China that are just fine. And then Hegseth says, oh, well, little different message here, like it's breaking news, for Christ's sakes. China's been a problem for the last 20 years. But I mean, what can I say? It's crazy. It drives me nuts. Now it's your turn.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah, I mean, I'm close with several people who either have businesses or work for businesses who import, and I mean, now it's calmed down. We're sitting at 30%, I think, with China, but it was 145%. And so that is a massive, massive, massive amount. And you don't pay it over net 30 or net 60 or net 90 terms. It automatically deducts from your business's bank account as soon as you release the goods from the ports. So it has major, major impacts. And then, if you're a wholesaler and you pass those costs on to your retail customers, they say, whoa, 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 I can't sell this mug for $40. Who's going to buy this mug for $40? And then you talk about, inflation already and the cost of groceries and the cost of rent. And let's say you live in Whitefish, Montana, and you already have problems covering your bills. I mean, all of these things are going to have an impact. And even if the product you're buying is made in America, a lot of times the packaging is not, or some ingredient in the product is not. So that's going to add to the price too. I will go back to my other comment because I have some clarification about a day as a day, and it's about calendar days, and this has been something that both parties have utilized over the years, but basically using the definition of a calendar day to stop things from moving in Congress. There you go. I got it, Senator.
Ah,
Well, I think it's good, but I want to stick on tariffs for a second, okay?
Yeah.
And that is that 30% is less than 145%, but it's still 30% higher than it was before this president took office. And that tariff is also known as a tax. And who pays that tax? Americans pay that tax. And so, I always think back that, if Tester the taxer, when he was in the Senate, would have put a 30% tax on everybody, I'd have been run out of office, and for damn good reason, I might add. But this president can get away with that kind of stuff, and that's baloney in my book.
When you've heard
It's going to
so
have
many
major impacts on my industry, just as it has major impacts on Main Street businesses.
You've heard so many people say too that, oh, it's China that pays for it. It's China that pays, and it's just not. It's just not. Like the importers pay for it, and that cost gets passed down to the consumer.
yes, that it does. This whole election has been a pretty big civic lesson for people who might have skipped that in high school.
Well, if they're paying attention, I'll be honest with you. A lot of folks don't pay attention. I'd rather watch a good NBA game between Oklahoma City and Indianapolis Pacers myself. But the truth is, this is real, and what they're doing in Washington D.C. impacts each and every one of us.
Incredible. Absolutely incredible time we're living in. So I'm pretty grateful to be out here in Montana, and there's no other state I'd rather be in right now. So it's been a true pleasure having you guys on the show today. I'm definitely going to do what I can to promote your show. And maybe when we have another election coming up, I would love to have you guys on to look at the candidates. We can break down the issues and see what's going on in the Valley and across Montana. And I just think it's incredible that me as a documentary filmmaker and a former senator and an accomplished journalist can sit together and have these really important conversations that so many people get to listen to. It actually gives me a lot of hope, not just for our state, but for our country. So I'm very grateful to have you guys on today. So thank you so much.
Morgan, we would love to come back on your show when we get closer out there, and then I can encourage Maritsa to do her homework and find out what a day is.
It'll only take a day to do it.
Well, what's a day? We're all going to die.
Of our own arrogance.
I'm kidding.
No, it's true. We are, but it's not. It's not the way.
That
you
sounds
should be
like a
looking
Shel
at life,
Silverstein
okay?
story.
You should be looking at life to make things better, not that you're going to croak tomorrow. So what the hell? Just give up.
Yeah.
Crazy.
Unreal.
Anyway, good to be with you. Thank you.
Thanks, Morgan.
Thanks, guys. Have a good one.